Took part in a historic election propelling Barack Obama, the country's first black president, into office with a sizable majority. Now, many hoped that the president would in fact be the uniting force that we all desperately needed. 7 years later, this country is anything but united. Tonight, with the help of a studio audience, we'll not only analyze these racial tensions, but look for solutions. But first, just as a reminder, this is what we saw and heard during the Baltimore riots.
Breaking news now and continuing coverage out of Baltimore, where the situation appears to be, well, deteriorating.
It's funny to them. They see us out here grieving, you feel me, and want justice. This is a joke. They think it's funny.
Chaos in Baltimore tonight. The governor of Maryland declaring a state of emergency in the city.
Are you watching this, guys?
15 police officers have been injured after clashing with very violent protesters. Now, the rioting continuing at this hour with protesters looting stores, attacking police.
Move back.
We got looting, the burning of buildings.
Just throwing rocks and bricks at the police officers here.
Rocks, boulders being thrown at police officers.
The only thing gonna make this community better is revolution, nothing less.
Black lives matter. Black lives matter.
Do not condemn people for their anger, and do not condemn people for their frustration because you failed to do what is right.
So have we seen the last of these tragic riots? Most Americans do not think so. An NBC Wall Street Journal poll shows that an overwhelming 96% of Americans think that more racial disturbances are likely this summer. Here for reaction, we bring in our studio audience. All right, show of hands. Barack Obama's been president. He's now in his 7th year. How many think race relations have gotten better? Hands up. Worse. No hand at all for you. What's up with that?
I think things are pretty neutral over the last 8 years. There are some things that have happened, such as police shootings, that have ignited some issues, but I don't think it's gotten worse.
All right, I say Obama's a 4-time loser on high-profile race cases. He said the Cambridge police acted stupidly. He had to have a beer summit. He rushed to judgment in the Trayvon Martin case. He was wrong there. We know in Ferguson, he mentions that. Michelle Obama mentioned it this week. He was wrong on Ferguson. And I think he's wrong to rush to judgment as a constitutional attorney on Freddie Gray. What do you say?
No doubt. I mean, look, we're breeding this type of animus in the country. You look at the case where this teacher just recently came out and said, you know, white men are the scourge of the earth or something along these lines. We are creating this type of thing. And having been on the ground in Ferguson, and I talked to that young black kid that you talked to about it, and his comment was, Kevin, why aren't people telling us the truth? After he came off air and he got the real story, he wanted to know the truth. We're not telling these kids the truth because nobody wants it. They want this strife. And that's why that 96% number is an overwhelming indictment of what's happening here.
Bishop Harry Jackson, you're in the pulpit. I think if we're going to help kids in America, along putting aside all racial issues, it's going to come from guys like you.
I think so. The early American flag, before we got the one we have now, said, appeal to heaven with the evergreen tree representing covenant. These problems are not going to be solved by themselves. We have to take some proactive stance. Think about it this way. Race, generational poverty, and I'm going to call it class are all intertwined. So we don't just have a race problem. It's just not black or white. We've got some people who feel angry and hopeless. So I hope tonight that we're going to deal with that. I just started an initiative called the Reconciled Church, and it's really bringing together high-profile leaders, T.D. Jakes, James Robinson, and others.
All good people.
Good people. Yeah. Really saying the church has got to lead the way, first to calm things down, and then to begin to deal with longer-term solutions to hopelessness.
Here's the next question. I want the show of hands again. Has Barack Obama, with his comments on the 4 incidents that I mentioned, is he stoking the fires of racial tension? How many say yes? How many say no? Why?
That these things exist is not Obama's fault. And I don't think that it's Obama's job. There's nothing that Obama can do to put out the fires. I think what he's trying to do is observe them and speak to what a lot of people do feel.
Can I just say one thing and then I'll go to Troy? Wait a minute. He's a constitutional lawyer. He said the Cambridge police acted stupidly. He had no facts. He rushed to judgment with Trayvon Martin. He had no facts. It turns out that Michael Brown robbed a store, intimidated a clerk. He fought a cop for his gun, probably to kill the cop, and then he charged the police officer. It never happened. Hands up, don't shoot. Never happened.
When you say he charged the police officer, what do you mean he charged the police officer?
He charged the police officer. The eyewitnesses, when you read the reports, charged at the officer.
Obama, I missed.
No, Michael Brown.
No, I understand what you're saying.
But the president invoked Michael Brown. Michelle Obama invokes him.
What Obama can do is tell the whole country, be quiet, relax, and let's see what happens. Follow the process and let the process work. Instead, he and Eric Holder, the former attorney general, immediately jumped in, said it's a racial case, it's black versus white, and it turns out afterwards, the attorney general had to come out afterwards and say it wasn't a black-white issue after all.
If I ask people in Ferguson tonight whether they think it was racial what happened to Michael Brown, what percentage of people would say yes? He had his hands up, don't shoot.
Well, I think despite the attorney general and the DOJ saying it was not a racial case, I think a lot of them will still say that it was.
Yeah, you're right. Bo Dito.
It was the environment that was set. Here in New York City, we have Big Bird Mayor de Blasio, who set the environment when you have people demonstrating, shutting down the streets. What do you want? Dead cops. When do you want it now? When you allow that to go on, we want dead cops. We got 2 dead cops by that bum from Baltimore that came up and assassinated 2 New York City cops. Please, let me just finish this thought because it's so important. I talk to cops every day out there. They've taken the gut and soul. You had an officer there that was hit with a hammer yesterday. She could have been killed. Thank God that reaction of the other cop was not to hesitate, because we would have had another dead cop. My whole thing is, look, when I grew up as a cop, I grew up in Harlem, Bedford-Stuyvesant. I was a servant to the black community. I didn't see black, white. I saw good, bad. You've got good kids. These kids have to get the environment changed. They got to have trades that they can learn to show that there is a way here in this country. I love this country, and it's all one.
Let me bring up a point.
Together.
This Monday in Louisville, Kentucky, the Nelson County Sheriff, a guy by the name of Ed Mattingly, told reporters there was a shooting incident that happened there. And he said, quote, "We are glad that the person that got shot is white." He said, "We shouldn't have to be worried about that." Let's go to Barack Obama on the issue of police incidents and what he has said about it.
The Cambridge police acted stupidly. There is a long history in this country of African Americans and Latinos being stopped by law enforcement disproportionately. And that's just a fact. The African American community is looking at this issue through a set of experiences and a history that doesn't go away. The African American community is also knowledgeable that there is a history of racial disparities in the application of our criminal laws. In too many communities around the country, a gulf of mistrust exists between local residents and law enforcement. In too many communities, too many young men of color are left behind and seen only as objects of fear. There are some bad politicians who are corrupt. There are folks in the business community or on Wall Street who don't do the right thing. Well, there's some police who aren't doing the right thing. I think there are police departments that have to do some soul searching.
Niger, with the power of the bully pulpit of the presidency, rushing to judgment on 4 high-profile racial incidents in this country, he turns out to be wrong. Wrong. Has he hurt race relations by doing that?
You know, the president talks about history. Let's talk a little bit about history. About 100 years ago, there was another progressive Democrat president named Woodrow Wilson. And he aired at the White House one of the most racist, disgusting films in the history of our country, Birth of a Nation.
That's right.
And he came out and said this was history written with lightning. Barack Obama is the reincarnation of Woodrow Wilson.
By the way, that pushed the Klan. Now, you're making a very tough charge here against the president. You're comparing that to Woodrow Wilson?
Absolutely. It's the same phenomenon. You have a certain degree of racial tension. The racial tension existed back then. It was palpable back then. And you, instead of being the calming voice that brings people together, you divide people. And you stoke the fire. And you stoke the racism. The only difference is, it's the same progressivism, same democratic progressivism, and divide and conquer the people. The only difference is the victimizer and the victim have switched sides in terms of colors.
Let me go to Stacey Dash. Stacey, you tweeted out back in 2012 your support for Mitt Romney. Sadly, I read some of the ugliest comments I have ever read in my life. Deneen writes about it in her book, Blacklash. You were a victim of a kind of racism for being black and conservative.
Yes.
Explain.
Well, I think first of all, it's good that I started a dialogue, but this is just an example of this White House plantation mentality, this narrative that they are trying to push upon the, disenfranchised, the uneducated. They want to keep them there, throw money at the problem, and think that's going to solve it, and that's not.
Like the $1.8 billion in stimulus money that they got, Kirsten?
My question is, in listening to the comments that the president made, I believe that his intention is not to stoke more racial tension, but to help people to understand the other side. And I think that's what he was doing in trying to explain the worldview that people of color might have that might be different from the white population or other minorities. So I think he's trying to bring people together, but it's just not working. So my question is, how can we as people, community organizations, the faith-based community, and others have a conversation that is productive rather than dividing?
But if we all believe that we're all God's children and we're all born with talent and ability, and we'll get to Michelle Obama's speech in the next segment, and she goes on this rant in a commencement address, and I felt like saying you needed to get to the part where you are the first lady, that America has grown to the point where white America had no problem voting for a black American president at all. By the way, much to my chagrin, and as much as his liberal policies, not the color of his skin, but I thought for liberal reasons he shouldn't be elected. But it showed progress, and she sounded angry. You heard the speech this week.
She is angry. Well, and I think it's a matter of always wanting, as a public figure, you want to match the emotional timbre of what's going on in the country. And so I think some of these speeches are trying to do that, to say, I empathize with you. And yes, it's not necessarily helping, but I think the more that you can start a dialogue around these issues, and you have panels like this, and you have other media that responsibly say, how can we convene a productive dialogue on this? We can turn a negative into a positive.
We're going to get back to your comment, her comment, and all of your comments. I promise everybody will get in, and Michelle Obama's comments from her speech earlier this week. And coming up next tonight, right here on the special edition of Hannity.
The folks who crossed the street in fear of their safety, the clerks who kept a close eye on us in all those department stores, the people at formal events who assumed we were the help.
When we return, our studio audience responds to First Lady Michelle Obama's commencement address. Later, Dr. Alveda King will join us, and Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark will weigh in on the racial divide being created here in America, and much more on the special edition of Hannity. We're glad you're with us. Michelle Obama recently gave the commencement address at Tuskegee University in Alabama. She used this opportunity to include some shocking comments on race and discrimination in America. Let's watch this.
We've both felt the sting of those daily slights throughout our entire lives. The folks who crossed the street in fear of their safety, the clerks who kept a close eye on us in all those department stores, the people at formal events who assumed we were the help, and those who have questioned our intelligence, our honesty, even our love of this country. And I know that these little indignities are obviously nothing compared to what folks across the country are dealing with every single day. Those nagging worries that you're going to get stopped or pulled over for absolutely no reason. The road ahead is not going to be easy. It never is, especially for folks like you and me. Because while we've come so far, the truth is that those age-old problems are stubborn. And they haven't fully gone away. And all of that is going to be a heavy burden to carry. It can feel isolating. It can make you feel like your life somehow doesn't matter. That you're like the invisible man that Tuskegee grad Ralph Ellison wrote about all those years ago. And as we've seen over the past few years, those feelings are real. They're rooted in decades of structural challenges that have made too many folks feel frustrated and invisible. And those feelings are playing out in communities like Baltimore and Ferguson and so many others across this country.
All right, we bring back our studio audience. How many think she hit the right message there? Show of hands.
She did.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. How many think she gave the wrong message? Okay. Let's go to Rod. We've been friends a long time. Well, it sounded to me angry. It sounded to me that everyone's going to have struggles, and there is residual racism. Nobody's disputing it. But I argue that 95% of Americans, the worst thing you could call them is a racist. And I don't think she was recognizing that, nor telling them, I'm the First Lady, in spite of problems I might have had. My husband's the President of the United States, in spite of Sean Hannity not wanting a liberal in the White House.
Sure, but I think, Sean, what she was trying to do, she was more passionate than anything in her speech. And I think she was trying to really relate to the audience. And I'll tell you, I listened to her speech. I listened to everything she said, Sean, and I could actually feel the tenor in her voice. I could feel exactly what she was saying.
You didn't feel anger. I felt anger.
I didn't feel anger. No, I felt passion, and I felt experience from her, and to me, she sounded like the First Lady. I have to give her that credit.
I have to say, honestly, she's the First Lady of the country. He's the President of the United States. Who here, I was born in 1970. Who could have told me 45 years ago that I'd be looking at a two-term black president? Granted, I don't agree with his policies, a lot of his policies, but he is a two-term elected president of the United States.
That's to me the message, right?
That's the message right there.
I believe both Obamas have missed a golden opportunity, really, to promote how exceptional our country is. Michelle Obama played identity politics, and it's President Obama, Eric Holder, Jesse Jackson, across the board. Identity politics, they want to divide our country, and instead of uniting Americans, we hear this rhetoric on a regular basis. And to talk like that at a graduation ceremony, I found it very discouraging, and I found that, but because of her position, she could have done a much better job to talk about how she got from Chicago to Ivy League schools to the White House. And if I can do it, you can do it too.
That was what I thought. Tom.
That was a message.
Well, go ahead.
But that is what she was saying. And it bothers me when an African-American woman speaks clearly and forcefully about something, all of a sudden she's angry. She was talking about the true issues, because regardless of your income level, regardless of how much education you have, they're still no.
Stacey's responding to you. Hang on.
No,
Yes,
can I finish?
No.
Go ahead.
She sounded She
No, I
sounded
mean, he's a host.
ungrateful.
No, but you all are wrong.
One at a time.
Ungrateful. She's the first black woman to be the First Lady of the United States of America. She should be proud. She should be trying. No.
She should be gracious.
Hold on a second, Sean.
One at a time.
What she did.
Let Stacey finish. Go ahead.
Even if she has that opinion, there's a way to express it without causing division. She should be trying to unite. That is the only, like they say, united we stand, divided we fall. That's why we are falling.
You all are playing one clip of a long commencement speech that was very powerful, that was very inspirational. And when you have someone who's in this position, and she was doing the right thing, she was speaking at Tuskegee University and telling students, you have the right to, just because you have negative issues going against you, you will be great. And that's what she was saying.
We have come a long way to see a black woman up there as the First Lady. She should have been saying, this is where I am right now. This is why I am here, and you should aspire to this.
Yes.
She should have not had.
Wait. Let him finish. Wait, go ahead.
That's what she said.
No.
We have come a long way, and we have a long way to go. What part of that did you not hear?
I didn't hear that.
You're missing the message.
Did you see the entire speech? You know why? Because there were too many negatives.
Hang on.
There were too many negatives in there for me to. I mean,
did you see the entire speech?
If I was there,
did you see the entire speech?
No,
exactly. Because you're playing a clip, and that is the problem.
There were many clips,
you're playing a
and if
clip
I was in there, I would have walked out thinking that, you know what?
You all are.
This is bad.
This is bad.
This is terrible.
If I was in there, I would be waiting for my commencement speech.
Every time the Democrats do this, and people that are in power that are black, and there's a lot of powerful black people in this country. Baltimore is a good example. Exactly. Okay? And every time they do this, they harken back to the 1960s. They harken back to slavery. Right. But instead of it being a powerful message of overcoming, it's always used as a reminder.
Can I just make an observation? I'm looking at an audience predominantly black Americans, all of you successful. in huge ways. And I think the message, my only disagreement with you is I listened to the tone and I'm like, she made it. This country has righted wrongs, thankfully, corrected injustices, thankfully, made progress, thankfully, and most people are not who she was describing.
You know,
and I felt that was unfair.
But a lot of people are, Sean. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, and I know about profiling. I know how situations such as Ferguson, how a large percentage of people of color
Hey, Sean, when you got,
I got a question.
Put into those positions.
When the president, as a criminal defense attorney,
yes,
when Obama mentions the Cambridge police, Trayvon Martin, Ferguson, Missouri, Freddie Gray, in his city of Chicago, how many blacks have been killed? You don't know their names. Wait. Why doesn't he ever talk about that?
Sean, when the president,
I've never heard him talk about it.
Let's take
his own home city.
Wait a second.
First of all, Trayvon Martin case, although George Zimmerman was found not guilty, he was wrong for approaching Trayvon. We do know that. The Freddie Gray case, this man was alive and well.
Trayvon Martin grounded and pounded, according to the one eyewitness in that case, sir.
No, Trayvon Martin.
There was an eyewitness that said he saw Trayvon ground and pound
with a gun. That's self-defense as well.
Well, he shouldn't be involved with this. He should not be involved as the president. No, talk about it. Where was he? Where was he when 2 officers got killed in New York? Where was he? Hold on a second. Where was he when 2 of my officers got assassinated in New York? Nobody from that White House other than Biden was there. Where was the Attorney General? Where was Loretta when this poor kid got shot in the face twice last week? No representation from the federal government. I get upset about it. They run to Ferguson. They run all over the place. How about our cops that are out there dying like yesterday almost?
And how about the African American kids who are dying at the hands of cops?
We got to take a break. When we return, Dr. Alveda King will join us, and Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark will join us to weigh in on the racial divide from coast to coast, and then later tonight.
I think that white supremacy is so insidious and ingrained in this institution that you don't even have to have a white person around, right, to have white supremacy play out.
So is media coverage of the racial tensions in this country hurting or helping our audience? They'll weigh in and much more. Straight ahead. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. Joining me now with reaction to the escalating racial tension in the country, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark, civil rights leader Dr. Alveda King. Alveda, good to see you again. What would your...
Sean.
What did I do now?
Well, you know how to stir the boiling pot. The melting pot of America is boiling over, and you are right on with this discussion.
Okay, but I want to know... I'm a radio and television host. I want to know if the President of the United States, what would your uncle think of his statements, of Michelle Obama's statements that she's made recently about the current situation about race in America?
My uncle would understand that Mrs. Obama, the First Lady of the United States of America, was functioning from the pain of the human soul, the will, the mind, the emotions. But he would call her to step up higher into the human spirit that can look at the content of a character rather than the color of a skin. And, you know, we have skin color, and that is part of the human experience, but we cannot live there. We must be elevated. That's where the answers are going to be when we go into the spirit, the human spirit, and connect with God and find our solutions.
Yeah. You know, Sheriff Clark, you hear the president. We just played his comments about police officers. And I told the story about this Nelson County sheriff in Kentucky who actually said that, wow, they shot a perpetrator, police department. We were glad that he's white. We shouldn't have to be worried about that. Where is that kind of comment having to come from?
Well, first of all, I don't like that comment, but let me say this. Who would have thought that we would need a period of reconstruction similar to after the Civil War, after the election of the first black president of the United States? Sean, one of the reasons that we can't have a discussion on race in America, listening to your last segment, is people start talking over each other and you can't get a word in edgewise. But let me say this about the First Lady. I thought that was pathetic. That was her I feel your pain moment. She should know better than that. When you're talking to young people like I get to all across the Wisconsin area, I give them a message of hope. I tell them to overcome obstacles. Sure, it's tough in life. Sure, you have to come from behind. You started off from behind, but you can catch up as we go on. So on the way I've approached this thing, I have forgiven America for the past sins of slavery. I didn't say forget. I said I've forgiven them for that. And I've decided to leave that plantation and shed that emotional baggage so that I could participate in the mainstream. That's the message that I try to share with young people. Instead of this perpetual creation and division of turmoil between blacks and whites in America. I think it's been a very destructive period of time the last 6 years. I think it can get better, but first it's going to have to start with a lot less emotion, and I think that's on both sides of the table here.
Alveda, let me ask you, the president often talks about high-profile race cases. We have an epidemic where young people, we don't know their names, like Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin and Freddie Gray. We don't know their names, of kids being killed in cities all across this country every day, including Atlanta, where you live, and I used to live. Why doesn't the president ever talk about that when the numbers are so much higher than these incidents that we talk about with police?
There again, elevation is required. Content of character, recognizing that these young men, young women, young teenagers and children are human beings. We're not recognizing them as human beings.
But we're not saving them.
We're having a skin color war, which is primitive. The skin color war is primitive. It's base. We've got to elevate. Dealing with the content of character, recognizing the worth of each of these young people, and once we recognize that worth, give them a reason to live, not a reason to be angry, not a reason to feel as though they are still on the plantation, that they are still the victims. They need to know that there is something of value in their lives, and this can be done. I agree with Sheriff Clark.
Sheriff, what's your reaction? We have an epidemic. Young people killing young people. We don't know their names. We don't hear the president talk about that. If it's a police incident, high profile, if it fits a narrative that's political for him that he wants to advance, we hear about it. Why doesn't he use the power of the presidency for that?
Well, you know, that's what I keep my fingers crossed every time that I hear him speak on this issue, but he stumbles out of the gate. Look, he has an opportunity here. He's a role model for a lot of not just black people, but young black men all across America. And what he should do is to remind people of lifestyle choices. It's the behavior of many of these young black men in these urban ghettos that cause most of the problems that they endure. It's self-inflicted. All right, school failure, having kids out of wedlock, young black men having kids and not being a real father and a dad to those kids. And I think that they would listen more coming from him than from somebody else. So I think it's just a missed opportunity. It's a swing and a miss. But when you go through life looking at everything through the lens of race, you're going to find a boogeyman lurking around every corner. When I listened to Michelle Obama, First Lady of the United States, with all due respect, I couldn't tell if she was talking about 2015 or 1815.
Oh, all right. Powerful statement from both of you. Guys, good to see you both. And up next tonight on the special edition of Hannity.
When are we going to have a language to talk about the systemic violence that white folks do in the name of anti-blackness and white supremacy in this country?
Now, the media, they're not exactly helping when it comes to racial tensions in the country. We'll check in with our very demure and very quiet and shy studio audience as the special edition of Hannity continues. Straight ahead. Welcome back to the special edition of Hannity, race relations in the Obama era. Now, places like Baltimore and Ferguson are still recovering from violent protests and riots that shook peaceful communities to their core. The mainstream media was quick to call police racist and lay the blame entirely at their feet. For example, watch this.
When are we going to have a language to talk about the systemic violence that white folks do in the name of anti-blackness and white supremacy in this country?
I think that white supremacy is so insidious and ingrained in this institution that you don't even have to have a white person around, right, to have white supremacy play out. With an institution like American policing that I believe is founded on anti-blackness, on slave patrols.
You say cops. Really, we have to say really bad cops,
but
a small number of cops.
Suspects.
One of the emerging issues that we have now is the state of race relations with the police department.
So is the mainstream media hurting or helping racial tensions in America? We bring back our studio audience. Alex, I would say, of course there's racists in America. I would say the worst thing you could say about somebody is that they are racist, and most people would never want to be ostracized that way. But when you listen to that, it's like, oh, all the white Americans, white
MSNBC too, right?
Yeah.
MSNBC,
Al
has
Sharpton's network.
Right, they
Yeah.
have a narrative and they're playing to their base. I think a lot of times what you have is lazy reporters, unlike yourself who wants to question what you're hearing from the government. There's so many that take that press release from that White House and that's what they report. And that's what the White House wants. They want to zone in on their narrative, and that's the Democratic Party's big government. President Obama bashes police because he wants federal law enforcement reform. He wants the federal government
Maybe to federalize
step over state and local. He's
Yeah.
all about Big Brother, and that's the problem. That's what we're seeing. He's fighting the same narrative that we saw, from Johnson and Kennedy when they did the war on poverty. Big government is not the solution, and that's a perfect
Let me
example.
go to Tom Borelli. Tom hasn't spoken yet, and in case you don't know, that's such a cute couple. They are married. You've traveled the country a lot with Deneen. I'm friends with both of you. You've seen some ugliness because your wife is a black conservative. You've experienced the ugliness. She wrote a book about the ugliness. Google her name, she says in the beginning of her book.
Right.
And a lot of ugly things come up.
No, absolutely. But that's the way you win, by going into the communities. We went to the NAACP meeting last year where there was a woman screaming in Deneen's face. But where the media is making the biggest mistake is they forgot to question why. Why is this happening? What is the root cause? Is anybody asking why President Obama wants to veto the voucher schools in D.C.?
Wouldn't that save? Do we all agree on that? Wouldn't vouchers save kids from failing schools?
Right. And Obama's illegal action on immigration, what's that going to do for black unemployment? Obama's climate change regulations drive electricity prices higher.
Wait a minute.
What's that going to do to the black
immigration?
community?
More people competing for maybe some.
The word that has come up over and over again, and it started with Stacey, but it was repeated by others, is plantation. And the reality
That's a hard word.
It's
That
a
is
hard
that's
word.
a hard word.
But it's a powerful word, and the metaphorical plantation that a lot of folk within Baltimore, inner city Chicago, is the plantation of victimization. And what Obama and Michelle, God bless her, the first black first lady, are pushing are shackles.
Victimization.
Shackles of victimization, so that there's no hope. There is, because I'm black, I'm destined for a particular lifestyle. Whereas if you put up vouchers, this administration has had a war on vouchers, on school choice, which would help liberate these folks.
Rod is shaking his head, and I've known you a lot of years. I don't see you shake your head like that a whole lot. What's up?
With all due respect to my good friend Nigel, I totally disagree. I don't think the message that's being given by the White House is plantation. I think what the gentleman
he
here
said victimization too.
Yeah, but I don't think that's it.
Didn't Michelle say that you're going to be victimized? How about the messages? Yeah, there are some ignorant people. I've met them.
Yeah, but
we've all met them.
But Sean, what's the
don't let them
reality?
stop you.
Yeah, but what's the reality? What she was saying in her speech at that graduation was that regardless of what you think you are, you can still achieve higher. That's the message that I heard from the First Lady. But one other thing, real quickly, Sean, I have to say this about policing. Okay, that's something I know a little bit about.
A lot about.
It's unfortunate that all of this is falling at the feet of police officers because it's not. Police is not the problem. Trust me when I say, Bo, am I right? Police is not the problem. It's the politicians. Exactly.
The politicians are the problem, because look at Eric Gardner. Eric Gardner died for a $7 cigarette. Okay?
They wanted the tax money. They busted this guy all those times for what, a cigarette?
We're using our police as unregulated tax revenue collectors.
No, this is
There's some truth to that. There's truth there.
Sean, this is we started this.
But why was he put in the chokehold by the police? Because they wanted a $7 fine for a cigarette.
I'm a martial artist. It was a headlock. It wasn't a chokehold.
We started this block talking about the media, and where the media has been strongest is in trying to address some of these underlying issues, which affect all people, and those are civil liberties, criminal justice reform, civil forfeitures, all of these issues that we should all care about in our communities. The over-militarization of the police across the country with these slush funds that they use military equipment against their communities. This is building distrust against communities of color and white communities and other minority communities. We should all be upset about this, and we should all be talking about criminal justice reform and
in
civil
Ferguson,
liberties.
wait a minute, in Ferguson and in Baltimore, These were all minority businesses. We had all the Ferguson business owners in this studio.
We should be talking about the deeper issues that these situations reveal, so we can talk about that and bring people together to talk about
government
those
dependency,
problems.
maybe an attitude that says that the world
government does not work.
All right, coming up, final thoughts from our great studio audience coming up right after the break. Stay with us, straight ahead. All right, welcome back to the special edition of Hannity, Race in America. We bring back our studio audience. Final thoughts. Pastor, final thoughts.
I think what we've got to understand is we've got a short-term problem and a long-term problem. We don't want people to hear this broadcast and think we don't care about the lives lost.
Everybody in this room cares.
Exactly.
Everybody in this room cares.
So,
by the way, did you bring a funnel? This is not the spring break show.
I brought this funnel to talk about this. The violence in the street is just the end of the funnel. I think we need criminal justice reform. Listen to me about this. 2.3 to 2.4 million people are in prison. About 61% of them are black and Hispanic. The animus on the street is amplified by mistrust of the system because some of these guys are cycling back into society. They feel hopeless, these younger folk. They feel like they don't have a chance.
You get in that system, it's hard to break that cycle.
So we're spending all our
we're going quick here.
we're spending all our time talking about this end
instead of that.
And instead of that,
you know what's important? You know what's important? Getting these kids, teaching them trade to be plumbers, electricians. Let's teach them some trades so they got something in their lives. Not going and looking at these rap stars with their golden diamond and their Bentleys and their Rolexes. You know that's the problem.
So
of these kids.
What I want to say real quickly is when we talk about racism, we talk about it one directional. There are more racists on the left than all the conservatives on this planet. That's where the racism is. And the second thing is we got to hold our communities responsible.
There are racists on both sides.
Well, but there's a lot more. It's a small percentage on our side, and we talk about it all the time, and it's unidirectional. The second thing is in Baltimore, 370% more crime, average crime, violent crime, than the national average. What are you talking about not sending cops there? They need more cop presence.
Hang on, DeRoy, go ahead.
We hear about white racism, we hear about white privilege and all that. My answer is, so what? You still got to pay your bills, you still got to take care of your loved ones, still got to take care of your community. So get educated, get focused, get cleaned up, and go out and be a productive citizen. And let the white racists be amazed and stunned when you actually perform and
Does everybody believe, look, we all agree that there are some racists, but if you work hard and you study and you develop marketable skills, regardless of your race, do you all agree you will succeed?
Yeah.
Everyone agree?
Right, and you can become the
You don't agree with that?
No, luck plays a lot into it. Look, the reason
you work hard, you get a degree, you develop marketable skills. I argue you cannot fail in America.
To quote Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. So you don't. So you're going to have to push for it.
The $1.8 billion in stimulus dollars that went to Baltimore, $3,000 per person in Baltimore. I want to demand an investigation from this Justice Department. Show me the money. Where did the money go?
Add to that $1 billion a year for their schools, and they suck.
Sean, the bottom line is there's clearly a lot of mistrust in our communities, and we need people, families, community leaders, the faith community, politicians, and police to come together and let down some of the pride and have compassion and empathy for their fellow man and start this conversation seriously.
Because I think I admire everybody, even the few liberals here. I think we ought to take this on the road into Baltimore. Take it into cities.
Let's go.
Big shows.
Come on over to my house.
That's it.
Let's take it over there, baby. I lived in Baltimore for 5 years. I lived in West Baltimore 5 years. Let's take it there. America is the greatest country in the world. Let's take it there.
We do need to fix the families, though. We do need to fix the families because in the communities, the families need to be fixed. And with that, the communities and the towns and the cities and the states are fixed.
Generational poverty that exists happens under liberal domestic policies.
We're going to end it there. Hang on a second. We got to take a break. We'll come back. More of the special edition of Hannity, Race in America under Obama. Straight ahead. All right, that's all the time we have left this evening. Thank you so much for being with us. And I want to thank our great studio audience. Thank you all. Give yourselves a hand. And we hope you all have a great night. Thanks.